Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session with Dr. Stephen Fitch. So I'm Claudia Hogan. I'm Melissa's Chief of Staff, and I'm a super proud sponsor of this month's theme, which is Green Planet. We are celebrating Earth Day, which is tomorrow, and we're using the whole month to celebrate Green Planet. So we have a lot of events, initiatives still coming, some ongoing. And today, really excited to be hosting Dr. Stephen Fitch, who's the CEO and founder of the Eden Refrigeration project. And that's a partnership we have behind the SUSE forest. So I'm also someone, Steve, you're someone who really inspires me, and I hope by the end of today, that will be the case for many of us here on the call as well. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Steve. So, Steve, I wanted to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your life journey. Tell us about you. Who is Steve?
Well, it's been an interesting life, different than almost everyone else, I suppose you'd say. My parents were actually missionaries, so I grew up in the southern Philippines on the island of Mindanao. Spent a lot of my time as a third culture kid. I'm not necessarily an American. I'm not necessarily a Filipino. I'm something in between. What's most important to me in my life is my family. So I've been married for 40 years this year. So pretty cool. We have 3 wonderful children and 2 grandchildren, and that's the joy of my life. And then there's been other parts of the journey, but in the last 10 years, or 11 years now, I've been full-time with Eden Reforestation Projects, which is a group that I founded about 5 years before I went full-time. So loads of fun.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for the introduction. Family is always like a foundation, very important, I think, in the lives of many of us. So before we continue the conversation, so just to give everyone, I think now everyone had the chance to log in. So before giving just how this is going to go, we're going to have a 30-minute conversation, you and I, Steve, and then we're going to open for the audience to ask questions. So if anyone has questions, please start putting on the Q&A, and then Jenny will help us moderate afterwards. So Steve, tell us about the Eden Reforestation project. So you were the founder of the project, and it has huge milestones have been achieved already, 500 million trees already planted, projects all over the world. Where did the idea come from? What is the achievement that you want with the foundation? Can you tell us more about the project?
Yeah, I think that the idea, at least, identifying the massive problem was way back in 1997 when I returned to my boyhood home. I grew up in the Philippines, and it was a tropical paradise. Mindanao was covered with jungle. The oceans were pristine. It was amazing. And then when I went back some 25 years later as an adult, it was destroyed. And the negative consequence to so many aspects of life and wildlife and beauty just shocked me. And about that same time, I was starting to work, very part-time, but still starting to work in leading efforts in the nation of Ethiopia. Short response is I became friends with the president of the Southern Nations, Nationalities, and People Groups, Haile Mariam Desalegn, who later became the prime minister. And he's the guy that asked me to take over a failed EU-funded forest restoration project. He thought I was good at getting stuff done, and they were desperate to find a solution. I guess desperate enough to ask this crazy sucker named Steve to take it on. So that's how we started. It was not in my plan. It was a request from a politician. Key lesson, don't meet with politicians. So
well, if we fast forward, I think probably the politician as the right person. Can you tell us more about the project? What is the goal? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, that project at Udu was classic. You had a radically deforested area that had just 40, 50 years early was your classic pristine Rift Valley forest with elephants and zebra and, the whole thing. And during several critical points, they cut it all the forest down as a means to survive. They were just trying to survive during the time of what's called the Derg, the communist rule, when they were forced into collective farming. And with the destruction of the forest, their farming became worse and worse. Their springs dried up, horrible flooding, drought, classic desertification and climate change patterns. And so the goal was to really to turn that around.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting that it seems like it is a problem that you've seen a long time ago as in your upbringing, and then you've been like focused on trying to improve and solve this problem throughout your career in your life, right? And so specifically so at SUSE we're trying to be more green. We call it the Green SUSE, and I'm here representing the GoGreen network, employee network, and we're all about the environment and raising awareness and trying to do the right thing. And we were looking for an organization to partner. And so what really called our attention when we came across Eden Project was that you have a very holistic business model, which is not just about planting trees. You're really understanding the ecosystem of these communities and what's going on the ground. And it is even clear on your slogan, right, which is like plant trees, save lives. Would you share with us more about what is this business model and why does it work so well?
Well, when President Hailemariam asked me to take over the project, honestly, I knew nothing. I had no money, I had no leaders, I had no knowledge. All my degrees are in the wrong field. But I was literally entering into a dissertation phase of my doctorate. So I asked my doctoral committee, can I study what works and what doesn't in terms of forest restoration? And the bottom line is it was really easy to find what doesn't work. And probably the most single profound common denominator is most forest restoration efforts view the local population as the enemy or a problem to overcome or to get rid of. And honestly, I've come to the conclusion that that is the remnant of colonial era mentality. If we get rid of these First People group, get them out of here, everything will turn back to the way it should be. So the few projects that I found that were successful were small scale, but they made the local population allies. And so Eden's philosophy came out of that doctoral study that is what we now call employ to plant. These are desperately poor people. They're just trying to survive. So they're cutting down trees. Usually it's women who are trying to feed their children. And we would all cut down trees if it meant feeding our children for a few more days as opposed to watching them starve. So we provide...
Just to give a little bit of color, because obviously we are sitting here and I have a gas oven, right? I just turned the button on and I have food on my fridge. But the reality, let's put it as an example like Madagascar, right? It's like people don't have that. They have to cut the trees to make fire, to cook their food, or to open space to plant something to eat. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what is the reality down there?
Well, it's really more often than not, again, picture this, millions and millions of women worldwide who are cutting down 2, 3, 4 trees a day to turn it into charcoal. And it has to be a live tree to turn into charcoal. And they take that charcoal and they sell it. And they'll make maybe $2. And that's enough, believe it or not, to feed their families.
I see.
It's hard for the average Westerner, in Europe or the US or wherever, to understand that level of poverty. And turning them into allies by giving them what we call the dignity of employment. The whole goal is their job now gives them dignity, and their job is to plant or produce trees, plant trees, and to protect trees. And the amazing thing that we've discovered over the years is how that model causes that local village or population to fall in love with their forest. It's theirs. They produced it. They own it now. And it's changed their lives in so many ways. So it's a real simple model, but it's profoundly effective in many ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is simple. Like, you employ the local community, engage with them to plant, so you have a circular economy right there, right? Simple, but like not many projects have achieved that. And I guess the point that you made about, like, you know, understanding where they're coming from, their challenges, and trying to work with them on that, right? And I think that is a good segue to the SUSE forest. So we spoke before, but basically, when we were thinking about, like, we want to do something good for the environment, we obviously know the chameleon is a big part of our culture. And so we looked, okay, locations where the chameleon might be endangered, and Madagascar was an obvious one. There are so many species of chameleons there. And it's a country that is really, struggling with slash and burn agriculture practices, poverty, and so the habitat of the chameleons are being endangered, right? But, protecting, as I said, protecting the chameleons is not just about the chameleons. You protect the whole ecosystem. You support the local economy. So the impact is much beyond that. So would you mind sharing a bit more about the project in Madagascar itself? So for those who haven't seen on the map, it's an island, east coast, southeast coast of Africa. It is one of the largest islands on the planet. And it's really special because it has a lot of indigenous species. So species that only exist there, like certain types of chameleons, lemurs, and a lot of plants as well. So it's a very delicate and important ecosystem. Would you tell us a bit more about the project, the Eden project in Madagascar?
Well, first of all, Madagascar is not a cartoon. Some people call it the eighth continent because something like 80% of its flora and fauna are endemic, only found there. And that includes I think it's about 2/3 of the world's chameleons. So SUSE is going to be working with us in Madagascar on a combination probably or focus on either mangrove restoration, which is essential to the ocean health, and or dry deciduous, where a lot of chameleons and lemurs and incredible creatures live. And with your commitment, hundreds of thousands of trees will be planted and grown, not just planted. You got to end up with a mature tree. So. And
it's interesting. I think we were having this conversation yesterday about, like, what site, because we really want to get a designated site for SUSE where we can see the plants growing, the tree growing. We can really see in real life what this looks like and see the progress, right? And we talked yesterday about, like, mangrove or a different type of forest, as like chameleons are not on mangrove. I guess we need to think through that. But I think both sites would be interesting to explore. But do you know more information about the other site where the chameleons might have as habitat?
Well, dry deciduous is where the chameleons would live. And literally yesterday after our meeting, I received a photograph from our national leader there with a chameleon, Camellia broxea. And that's a chameleon that will fit. He's tiny. It'll fit on your thumb, the end of your thumb. So they have those little tiny ground chameleons that live in that dry deciduous forest. And then they also have Fucifer osteleti, or the Oscars, and they're basically small cat size. And they have some fascinating chameleon types in between. So it's prime chameleon habitat.
That's really cool. And one thing I learned, another point about Madagascar, and that's a bit more personal to me, is that I spent a month in Madagascar about 20 years ago in a project there, and we were supporting the lemurs. And obviously a big learning and takeaway for me It's like when we went there and saw, wait, it's not just the chameleons that are in danger, like the local population, is with slash and burn, they have less good soil to plant, the water resource are being impacted. But then you realize that lemurs were like a flag, but you really protect the whole ecosystem. So when we go and protect the chameleons, the little ones, the big ones, we also protecting a lot of other species and in the community, as we mentioned as well. Do you happen to know others like cool species that are on those forests?
Chameleon species or just in general?
Just in general. So there are the lemurs.
Madagascar has the craziest tree species and plant species. It's just amazing diversity of evolution that's taken place there. And anywhere you go, you're going to see stuff that's nowhere else. And of course, there's a lot of fascinating reptiles. One of the interesting things about Madagascar, it has no big cats, so there's no lions or leopards or anything like that. And there are no poisonous snakes in Madagascar. There are ground boas and tree boas, but if you're afraid of poisonous snakes, go around mad, you'll be fine. You're not going to get bitten and killed. There's other ways to die in Madagascar, like giant crocodiles, but that's its own story.
Fresh water?
Fresh and salt. Yeah.
Fresh and salt.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds scary.
Yeah.
But you need the big animals, right, to have the whole life, the cycle life, I guess.
Cycle of life, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so back to the chameleon. I also happen to know you are very knowledgeable about chameleons, and if nothing else, there's a chameleon named after you. Do you want to tell us more about your passion for chameleons?
Yeah, I'm a chameleon nut. I don't know how that developed. There's actually no chameleons in the Philippines, so I didn't grow up with them, but I just became fascinated by them. And I was, when I was working in Ethiopia, some kids were beating something in a bush, and I know what little boys do. And so I went over and found this unique chameleon. I already knew the other 9 species that had been identified in Ethiopia, and this one was different. So I posted photos on the Chameleon Information Network, kind of a geek network about chameleons, and Dr. Peter Netches from Czech Republic is the one that later identified it as a true, unique, first discovered subspecies of Cameleo triceros horenii. So it's Cameleo triceros horenii fitchi. Yeah, he's my 4th child.
That's so cool. That's really cool. Do you know about this chameleon, our chameleon?
That's the common chameleon. You'll find them, I think, in Spain and North Africa. I think they extend all the way into India. I think it's called Cameleo or something like that. It's just the most common. And they're pretty cool guys. Yeah.
So I wanted to elevate a little bit the conversation and actually we've been talking about reforestation, SUSE forest, and I wanted to ask you, why is it important? It might sound obvious, but like, why reforesting the planet? Why is that important, and why we must act now? And obviously I'm thinking about like climate action and everything.
Well, we could take hours to talk about why it's important, but forests are the center points of so many ecological benefits, cause and effects. I put it this way. First of all, forests are habitat for animals. So all the extinction of species worldwide, a lot of it's forest destruction. You want to see that reversed? Plant forest. They're essential to climate, to rainfall patterns, to the flow of rivers and streams, and the filling of the aquifer. I put it this way: forests are the sponges of the earth. They're also the glue of the earth. When you consider forest with, unbelievable, unseen but massive root systems, when you have healthy forests, you don't have erosion. when the forests go away, you get all kinds of tragic erosions and flooding and soil nitrogen or nutrient depletion, etc. So it just goes on and on how important forests are. Trees are a big deal. And we know this. If you plant a tree, you sequester carbon. You know, here in the United States, there are still people who are doubting climate change. And I always tell them this, you know what, you plant a tree, whether you like it or not, it sequesters carbon. If you plant a tree and you do like it, it sequesters carbon. So it doesn't matter. It has all kinds of benefits, like it or not. So
yeah,
they're important.
Yeah, and you know, I think obviously the best plan is to not cut down the tree in the first place, right? But like, given that it's already done, then like reforesting comes as a second priority. I'm from Brazil originally, right? So the Amazon challenge has always been like, I grew up with that. It's top of my mind, and really calls my attention there is that there's a very lush, green, huge forest, but once you burn it, it's desert. It doesn't grow back, right?
It does. It can.
Well, not the same way, or it will take like thousands of years to get those trees. They have like 3 layers of trees and...
Not thousands. It can take decades.
You're making me more optimistic now. Tell me more.
And well, you know what? The thing that people don't understand is how resilient nature is. Just give nature a chance. Cooperate with it, and I think that's what Eden does more than anything else. Our 2 allies are the local population and natural regeneration. Our goal is to get a canopy up as quickly as possible with native species trees. And once you have that canopy, you have shade, you have moisture retention, you have leaf litter adding to the nutrients in the ground, you have erosion control, etc. And all the first species group to emerge are the microbes, the insects, then comes the small lizards and chameleons and little birds, and it just begins to move up. And usually within 5 to 8 years, tops, natural regeneration literally outproduces what we originally planted. And people ask, what's your survival rate? And my answer is, that's not a relevant question, because once natural regeneration kicks in, we're off to the races.
So what is important to have a successful reforest? Let's say, do you need to have different species of plants? What is the basic there? How do you start?
You want to start with the native, what they call pioneer species. So those are the species that are the most common and that are drought resistant, that sort of thing. They're the ones that are the most numerous in any given forest. And if you plant those are almost always nitrogen fixing species. What they frequently call legumes, because they grow like these bean pod seeds and they fix the soil. And that allows all those remnant seeds that were already there to start growing, or the root systems, or the seeds, the stuff that animals and birds bring in, to flourish. So it's a simple strategy. Yeah.
Do you have any, tips of where to start? Let's say I grew up in an urban environment, and, for me, animals are just the ones that I see on the city farm. So do you have, and, we all have kids that might be growing up in those environments like mine. Where to start, like, our knowledge about, just like why the nature is so important? If we want to understand more about like nitrogen cycles, like, where did you start? Because you said you didn't have the degree. So how did you start? And if you can give us some tips.
I think the best way to learn is to get your hands dirty. And I mean, literally, go on YouTube or something like that, learn a little bit, sure, but go to your local, nursery and buy a couple of trees and get your hands dirty, dig a hole and learn how to do it. It's not hard. I've said it this way for years. Everybody's amazed. You've planted 500 million trees. You're now planting 1 million trees every day. How do you do that? I would say, well, planting trees isn't that hard. In fact, did you know trees have been growing by themselves for billions of years? The hard part is to get humans to cooperate. And so get your hands dirty. Get some dirt under your fingernails.
I like that very much. So I think that's a good segue for my final question, which is, before I open up to the audience, obviously, what is your ambition? What is Eden Refrigeration project ambition? Where do you want to, where to stop?
There's a lot of talk about the Trillion Tree Initiative these days, and we've actually gotten to know Thomas Crowther a little bit in the Crowther Institute, and the frustrating point is there's a lot of sloganing going on, and Crowther would probably tell you, I hope it's okay for me to say this, it was never his goal to turn this thing into a slogan. It was an idea that says we need to plant trees. And so our ambition is honestly to raise up as many people as possible across the planet to get behind this simple process of employing people to plant trees. And we're now part of the 1 Trillion Tree Initiative with the UN in the United States. And they were amazed at our goal. I'm looking at the whiteboard over here. We're planning to plant this amazing number of trees. Literally, in the next 10 years, we want to be minimally have planted around 50 billion trees. But then every year thereafter, we need 50 billion more. And if you do reverse engineering, that means we need to train a lot of leaders. We need to get literally millions of people working in the field, producing, planting, and protecting those trees. So our ambition is to change the world, and to change as many nations as possible, and to operate in unity and fidelity with groups like SUSE and any and every other large, small business individuals that understand, you can make a big difference, because we plant trees for 10 cents a tree, which kind of blows people's minds. But how do you manage to plant for 10 cents a tree? Well, that's how much it costs. That's my answer. Real profound.
Yeah. Well, I love the ambition, and we are, we want to be part of it. And I think we're going to release this video for our community, right? For our customers, partners, for the open source community as well. And this is a call out for everyone to join on this mission with us. And so thank you so much for taking my questions and for this conversation. I'm going to turn 4 questions to the audience, but before I do so, I wanted to first say a big thank you to the GoGreen network and all the employees that have been involved. We wouldn't be here without every one of you who have been working hard towards the environmental cause in the company. And a big shout out to Beatrice, who has been leading the GoGreen initiative, and it has been super key behind the whole partnership with Eden Refrigeration. So B, if I can call you out, because I want to give you the first question before we pass on to Jenny. Are you there?
Hello, I'm here. Hi everyone, and I'm honored to be asking a question, Steve. But yeah, both thank you so much. That was a fascinating discussion. I think I can speak for everyone listening that I've learned so much. So thank you, Steve, for sharing your stories and sharing a bit more about Eden. My question for you, Steve, is what's it like being CEO for Eden Reforestation projects? What are the kind of day-to-day responsibilities that are involved in such an amazing job?
Well, looking back over 16 years, what it's like is constant surprise. I didn't expect to start this. I didn't expect us to turn into the world's most prolific tree planting organization. So surprise, surprise, surprise. But my day typically starts early. I'm an early riser, so 5:30 in the morning, I'm up answering emails from across the planet, interacting with key leaders across the planet, and then I grab some breakfast, make coffee for my wife and make her breakfast and get her out the door, because she's doctor as well. She's a real doctor. She helps people. Um, and then it's a lot of meetings, coordination meetings and strategy meetings, and frankly, talking to corporate donors and major donors and individuals that are wanting to make a difference. So it's a busy day. And I usually end the day by writing. I always have writing assignments, people asking questions or strategies that need to be developed. So, crazy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea. So Jenny, do you want to bring us the audience questions? Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Claudia. Yes, we do have some questions here, and there's definitely a theme following up on one of your questions, Claudia. So, Steve, people are asking quite similar questions around, have you got any recommendations, Eden aside, of organisations that people should try and associate with and find out more about? And also, are there any other resources that you would recommend if people just want to delve in and find out more?
Yeah, you know, I would say, you know, if you're in Europe or not in Europe, Ecosia is a search engine that is based in Germany, an amazing for-profit organization that gives most of their profit away to forest restoration efforts. And they're very, very impressive hearts, minds, and strategy, and they're making a big difference. There's a lot of great groups out there. If your real interest is, for instance, in agroforestry, if you want to plant more trees for human use, then Trees for the Future is a good organization to consider there. There's just lots of good resources. I mean, Google any country and list the country in reforestation, and they'll take you there and tell you probably what the problem is and who's making a difference. So jump on, don't Google it, Ecosia it, and jump on and find out what's out there, what's going well.
Lovely, thank you, Steve, and we will definitely be posting some of those suggestions on our collaboration platform if everybody wants to follow up on those. And related to something you just said about, you know, doing our own planting. So in a very small way, we've got someone here that wants to also make a difference, and they're saying that they're thinking about planting a green fence. Are there any particular varieties of tree that you would recommend? And they're actually based in North America.
Okay. Well, North America is a pretty big continent. So, you know, with multiple ecosystems, a green fence is a great idea. And a lot of green fences can be made from cuttings. And I just would have to know where they are. Are they in Florida? Because the species that work in Florida aren't the same that work in New Mexico. So, you know, just do some basic research. The era that we live in, the answers, you know, all we have to do is type something into our computer. We can get answers.
I have an idea that I'm exploring on that note. So I now have a garden, and I'm super excited about eco-fitting the garden. So one that I read about is that actually you can train fruit trees to grow against the fence. So they don't take like garden space. They grow against the fence. You train them with a dwarf root, and then you can grow pears, apples, plums. At least here in the UK, I don't know, but that was a very cool idea that I saw.
Yeah, I have a very small backyard, and I have 13 fruit trees growing. And many of the citrus are dwarf, but fig trees are if you live in California or you know, more Mediterranean temperate climate, figs grow crazy, and you can start them from cuttings. It's just not that hard, and it's fun to learn. So jump in, get your hands dirty.
Lovely, thank you. We've got a lot of interest in some of the comments you made about the whole ecosystem and particularly about alleviating poverty. And it's prompted someone to ask the question around, every day we're consuming, maybe we're not out and about so much, but unfortunately we're getting lots of deliveries by said companies whose name shall remain nameless. But are there just simple choices that we can make as consumers that can make a difference and make a contribution to some of these ecosystems and do in a very small way our own contribution to alleviating poverty and giving back to some of these communities that are very vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, of course there are wise choices we can make. You can drive a Prius instead of a Hummer. You guys suggested this yesterday, take a cold shower instead of a hot shower. I'm going to stick with hot. I'm sorry. You can recycle, etc. But, the one thing I would appeal to all of us is it's easy to vilify a company, a nameless company, but what I'm seeing is as important as unity. And we really need to work together, regardless of who we are. And I'll name a company. Amazon is this giant delivery group. And I've actually had conversation with Jeff Bezos, and he's a big supporter of Eden now. And so maybe I'm tainted, but bottom line is instead of viewing people poorly or groups poorly, perhaps, we all ought to recognize we all get deliveries. We all use fossil fuels, and we need time to transition. So let's work together and try our best to be optimistic and think the best of one another as we transition. Because we do need to transition away from fossil fuels, etc. But it takes time. Yeah. Hopefully that's not being too preachy, but that's my conviction.
No, we like that message, Steve, and it's nice to see a little bit of the preacher coming out in you. You did hint at that earlier.
Yeah.
One of the questions we've got here is they're asking, in terms of, you spoke a bit about your role, be asked about your day-to-day, what does that feel like, what does it look like? But the question here is asking, as CEO, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your role, but also some of the big challenges in your role as CEO?
Yeah, I guess the most rewarding aspect is to see our mission so successful. I mean, just hearing literally tens of thousands of stories of people, most honestly and most common, single moms who are now able to feed and educate and clothe their children and who have hope again for the future of themselves and their family. Boy, is that ever rewarding. And also, I'll go to Nepal for a moment. We started 5 years ago, and now when I walk through the same desertified areas 5 years ago, there's a beautiful forest now, and I'm not exaggerating. It's not fully mature, but it's awesome. That's pretty rewarding. The greatest frustration, and it's not very egalitarian to say from some people's perspective, but dealing with corruption and broken cultures is hard. Just people who are used to being abused by the government authorities and being taken advantage of at every turn, and helping them to trust and to know that not everybody's like that, and that life can be better. That's a real challenge.
Yeah. So just one small comment. I hear you on the frustration, on the rewarding. You have an awesome TEDx talk that I watched, and you have an awesome image of the before and after. And I think when you mentioned that, I remember, I felt that when I saw the image that you share, like the site before and after, and like that was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's nothing more rewarding than to say, okay, this is desert in 2010, and this, oh my God, look at that. It's a forest now, and it's teeming with animals, and the springs have sprung up again, and all kinds of incredible stuff. the villagers are well fed and happy. So
clearly you have a lot of passion for what you do, Steve. And we heard a little bit about who is Steve, what makes Steve tick. So the question here is asking, what do you do when you're not being CEO? That's if you're ever off duty. What are your interests when you're off duty?
I've logged over 1,000 scuba dives in my life, so I'm waterlogged. I love the ocean, and growing up in the Philippines, obviously there's 7,000 islands, but we work in Madagascar, we work in Indonesia, we're starting in the Philippines, and I live in California. So I love being on or under the ocean, and I love being with my family. And we take the boat out and we go fishing and we enjoy nature, and it's a blast.
And talking about the ocean, you've just sprung a question in my own mind, is that clearly with that number of dives and that passion for the land and the sea, what similarities can you draw in terms of, the way that us as human beings, we have some things that we need to think about in terms of how we are looking at reforestation and the destruction of trees, but equally that applies to the ocean. You clearly have an affinity with the sea as well. What else should we be thinking about beyond reforestation?
Well, trees are actually important to the ocean. One of SUSE is thinking about planting mangrove trees. And mangroves are the coastal ecosystem in the tropical belt, where they say up to 70% of reef species and even pelagic species have some aspect of their reproductive cycle in those dense mangrove, root systems. The fish are little fish are able to swim around and not get ate by the big fish. And it's all connected, amazingly connected. I'm not one who says, stop, eating seafood. I'm not a don't guy. All things in moderation. Make wise choices. Don't buy shrimp that came from a shrimp farm. That means they cut down a mangrove estuary, and now they're polluting not only destroying the environment, but polluting the environment.
They throw antibiotics as well, right? And the water kills all other animals.
It's a horrendous behavior. So, be informed, learn, turn off Gilligan's Island and find out about island health, and, really learn. You guys probably don't know about Gilligan's Island. It's a stupid show in the U.S. back in the 60s. So, yeah.
Now I'm curious about it. Well, thanks so much, Jenny. I think we are on time here, right?
Thank
you for moderating. You're always the best moderator. I love when you are hosting us. Thank you so much. Steve, thank you so much for being with us, spending this time with us. I think I can only thank you in the name of everyone in the company. And, from reflecting from the questions that are coming, I think there's a lot of interest in how can I make a difference? Where do I start, right? So how can I contribute? How can I join? And so I mentioned this is a whole month. We're celebrating tomorrow. Tomorrow is Earth Day. So, if everybody can turn off their electronics for an hour, that's a good start. Also, we are doing a social media campaign. Everyone is invited, not just employees, but the community. And every post on social media will have a donation towards the Eden Refrigeration project. So we're asking people to just post what are they going to do? How can they help? And I'm going to talk about my new composting. So hopefully we'll see a lot of cool posts as well out there. Thank you so much, everyone. I think this is a wrap. Thank you, Steve. Do you want to make any final words?
I guess it would just be this. There's so many negative messagings out there regarding the environment. stay filled with hope. Beyond hope, take action. Do something positive. Yes, reduce your footprint, but do something positive. Even if it involves plant 4 or 5 trees in your own yard. Start a garden. Do what you can and make a difference. So there you have it.
Yes, thank you. Amen. All right, everyone.
All right.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time. Bye-bye.